Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm unboxing and setting up my new vacuum chamber and pump from VEVOR, and we'll be going over how this is important for doll making and why I needed it. First though, just full disclosure, this company reached out to me and asked if I was interested in a heat press for customizing t-shirts, and I was like, I don't think that's going to work for stuff as small as what I make. But I was making a list of things I needed for resin casting, and this vacuum chamber setup happened to be on the list, so I totally shamelessly asked for it. I didn't expect anything to come of it, but they agreed, and here we are. So, not sponsored, but I did get this free, and this is going to be my complete, uncensored opinion. It came packaged well, but the first thing I noticed was that the vacuum pump had instructions, but the chamber itself didn't. That's not a problem for me, I'm already familiar with them, so here's the quick walkthrough. It comes with this rubber gasket that goes on the rim of the pot to create a better seal. The lid is 1/2 inch thick clear plexiglass with a silicone seal on both sides so it can be flipped either way. The inlet valves and pressure gauge are pre-assembled, and there's a pre-drilled hole for this in the lid. It comes with a reinforced 10mm hose that has a fitting for the vacuum pump on one end and a clamp on the other. The gauge has silicone washers on it already for an airtight seal, and the fresh air inlet valve has a filter on it that is replaceable if it ever gets gunked up. I'll show you how this all goes together in a minute. Then we've got the vacuum pump itself. One thing I wanted to go over here is the oil, because I noticed information about it online was super sparse. But vacuum pumps are all pretty similar, and I've used one much like this for working on cars. The instruction manual calls for HFV32 oil, and it's almost impossible to find something labeled that in the United States because we don't use that viscosity scale. So what you're going to need to find here in the States is something labeled ISO 32. In the US, this is usually sold as hydraulic oil and can be found in most home improvement stores. You can see this here says it's for automotive pumps, which includes vacuum pumps like this that can be used to service a car's air conditioning. So after I pick up my oil, I take everything out to the garage to occupy my husband's workbench so I can have a well-ventilated space to work in. And then it's time to put everything together. I promise this is relevant to making dolls, so stick with me. I start assembly by unscrewing the nut on the valve and removing one metal washer and one silicone washer. The valve goes through the hole on the lid. I put the silicone washer and metal washer back on so the silicone washers are against the lid, and then screw on the nut. I use a 17mm wrench to tighten it, and it's very important that you do not over-tighten this, because this hole is a weak point, and too much pressure can cause the lid to crack. So it should be snug, but don't force it too tight. Next, I'm going to put the hose on the vacuum pump, and while we're here, I feel like it's important to point out that this pump has an air filter, which is so nice. A lot of pumps don't, and as a result, they spray an oil mist into the air while running, which can make a huge mess. Just make sure the filter is uncapped. The fitting for the hose has 2 different sizes of threading, and both have caps, so you just screw shut the one you aren't using. The fitting to connect to the vacuum pump is so tightly wedged inside my hose that I can't get it to come out, and the clamp gets in the way when trying to screw on the fitting. So I loosen the clamp enough to slide it up the hose and out of the way, then screw on the fitting. I did this first so the hose could rotate freely while connecting it to the pump. This doesn't have to be super tight, it seals well, so I just hand tighten the fitting and then put the clamp back on and cap the other threads. The red cap on the other side is where the oil goes in, so I fill it up. The other end of the hose goes onto the valve on the lid, so I loosen the clamp, press the hose firmly onto the extraction side of the valve with the green valve lever, then tighten the clamp to hold it secure. The clamps take a regular Phillips screwdriver, nothing special. The last step is to cut the rubber peak off the seal at the top of the gauge. Fortunately, there's a sticker on top of that that tells you to do this. It's about all the instructions you get. Now it's time to test. I close both the vacuum valve and the fresh air inlet valve, turn on the vacuum pump, and slowly open the valve on the vacuum side to let it start pulling air. The pump runs a lot quieter than I thought it would, and it takes less than a minute to get up to full vacuum pressure. Mine stopped moving at 28 inches of mercury, while 29 is the goal, but it stopped so abruptly and didn't waver at all. So I think it may just be as high as the gauge on mine physically can go, especially since it proved more than strong enough to degas the silicone I use later. I spent some time fiddling with it, draining and re-vacuuming a few times, as well as letting it sit for a while to ensure I didn't have any leaks. I didn't find any. This was perfect straight out of the box, no adjustments or cleanings needed for any of the seals. While removing air from something, you'd keep the vacuum on. Whenever it's time to shut things down, you'd want to close the vacuum valve first, then turn off the vacuum pump. After that, you can slowly open the fresh air inlet valve. You want to open it slowly though, because if your air rushes in too fast, it could cause whatever you're degassing, like silicone or resin, to splash. So now that we've assembled it and run through how to use it, we finally get to the important part, right? What does this have to do with making dolls? First, I'll put in the anti-suction mat to make sure my silicone bucket doesn't get stuck to the bottom of the chamber, and then we'll start preparing the silicone for a new doll. You see, one of the most important parts of creating professional-grade dolls is being able to make a good quality mold for the resin. A mold that contains any bubbles will collapse under pressure, meaning your dolls can't be cast in a pressure pot, so they'll always contain bubbles beneath the surface, even if you get a really good cast. It's possible to remove bubbles from molds other ways, but if you're casting a lot of parts or making larger dolls, the most effective method is to remove air from the silicone after it's mixed, but before you pour it to create your mold. The vacuum chamber removes all the air bubbles that become trapped in the silicone during stirring, so that when you pour it, you're guaranteed to get a beautifully smooth and solid mold that will withstand pressure casting. This is how all professional doll casting companies do it. And so having a vacuum chamber to degas silicone is a vital part of being able to produce professional grade dolls. Here you can see one of the molds I made after degassing my silicone. It's super accurate and incredibly smooth. I poured some extra silicone into another mold so I could cut it open and share a look inside. So you can see that after vacuuming, the silicone molds are completely bubble-free inside and out. This is going to be a complete game changer for the quality of my casting, and I couldn't be happier with how this all worked out. This is a great setup that does everything I need and lets me degas a good amount of silicone all at once, which is perfect for my 1/3 scale dolls. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.